Do you remember those holiday foods? The ones we bought when money was tight but hearts were full? In the 1970s, simple canned meals and boxed desserts turned ordinary kitchens into places of hope and celebration. How did so little manage to feel like everything back then? Canned ham was the unsung hero of countless 1970s holiday tables. When money was tight and a trip to the butcher was out of the question, that shiny tin of ham became a small luxury. It was cheap, easy to find, and could sit in a cupboard for months, ready to make any meal feel special. Families would pull it out on Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving and slice it thin to make it stretch farther. The salty, smoky flavor filled kitchens with that familiar holiday scent, even if it came from a can instead of an oven. Some brushed it with brown sugar or honey to give it that glossy finish, while others decorated it with pineapple rings and cloves to make it look fancy. Despite the low cost, it carried a sense of pride, proof that even a small budget could still bring people together around a warm meal. Parents taught their kids that it was not about what you could afford, but how much care you put into it. And somehow, the simple act of carving that canned ham made it feel like a celebration. It may not have been a spiral-cut roast, but for many, it tasted like home. Turkey loaf was the next best thing to having the real bird in the oven. Sold frozen or packed in a can, it promised the flavor of a Thanksgiving feast without the steep price tag. The meat was processed, seasoned, and ready to heat. No basting, no waiting, and no wasted scraps. For many working families, that convenience meant everything. It fed several people, paired perfectly with boxed stuffing, and looked right at home next to the cranberry sauce, even if it wobbled a little too much on the plate. Some people even went the extra mile, brushing it with melted butter or topping it with breadcrumbs to make it look more homemade. Kids grew up thinking that this was normal, the kind of turkey you could afford, the kind that fit in the family budget. The smell was still comforting, and the taste, though a little salty, felt like the holidays. Even when money was short, the turkey loaf reminded everyone that celebration was not about perfection. It was about togetherness. And when you sliced into it under dim kitchen lights, it felt close enough to the real thing. Spam and pineapple bake might sound unusual now, but in the 1970s, it was a beloved centerpiece of thrift and creativity. Spam was cheap, filling, and packed with enough salt to make anything taste satisfying. With just a few canned pineapple rings and a drizzle of brown sugar or honey, it turned into a sweet and savory dish that looked far fancier than it cost. Mothers called it poor man's ham, but they served it proudly, often on vintage Pyrex plates that had seen many holidays. The golden caramelized edges, the warm syrup scent, and that hint of tangy pineapple all made it feel festive, even if it came straight from the pantry. For kids, it was delicious comfort food, sticky, smoky, and oddly satisfying. Many families kept Spam as a standby, knowing it could transform into a holiday meal at a moment's notice. It might not have been carved at the head of the table, but it brought the same joy and laughter. In a decade defined by practicality and perseverance, this dish symbolized what made the 1970s kitchen so special: the ability to turn little into plenty. The canned green bean casserole was the dish that united nearly every American table during the holidays, regardless of income. Made from a few simple ingredients, canned green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and crispy fried onions, it was easy, affordable, and comforting. There was no fuss, no failure, and no expensive ingredients to worry about. For many families, it became the highlight of the meal, a side dish that always disappeared first. Moms knew it by heart and never needed a recipe. Kids learned to love it, even if the beans were soft and salty from the can. The smell of it baking filled the house with warmth, and that first scoop, bubbling and golden, always felt like the start of the holiday. It was not about luxury, it was about tradition and practicality. It gave every table a touch of that home-cooked magic, even if everything came from a can. And long after the feast was over, those flavors, rich, creamy, and familiar, reminded families that even simple food could feel like a feast when shared. Boxed stuffing mix was one of the greatest holiday inventions for the working-class kitchen. Before it, stuffing required hours of baking bread, chopping vegetables, and using precious butter. But in the 1970s, a cardboard box with dried cubes and powdered seasoning could deliver that same aroma in minutes. The smell alone could make any small apartment kitchen feel like a feast, even if there was little else cooking. Children would peek over the stove, watching the steam rise as the water mixed with the herbs and breadcrumbs, filling the air with warmth and memory. It was the kind of scent that lingered long after dinner ended, like comfort baked into the walls. All it took was water, maybe a dab of margarine if you had it, and the magic was done. It smelled like sage, onion, and nostalgia. Families poured it into casseroles or used it to fill out plates next to turkey loaf or Spam. Some added a few diced apples or celery to make it special, while others stretched it with extra bread to feed more mouths. The best part was how it brought everyone together, because even though it was cheap, it tasted rich. Boxed stuffing became a symbol of the era's ingenuity. Simple ingredients, little effort, and maximum comfort. Every spoonful carried the flavor of holidays made from determination and love, proving that even a box could hold a bit of Christmas spirit. Instant mashed potatoes were the kind of miracle that made holidays possible for struggling families. Real potatoes were cheap, yes, but peeling, boiling, and mashing took time and energy that many did not have. Boxed flakes promised the same result with half the work and cost. The box sat proudly on the counter, a promise of ease and warmth in the middle of a hectic holiday week. The sound of the flakes hitting the pot was unmistakable, soft, papery, and full of potential. And when stirred into hot water, it transformed into creamy comfort in seconds. Even without butter or cream, it tasted like effort and care, which was enough to make it special. When whipped with a little butter or powdered milk, they fluffed up into smooth, creamy clouds that looked just like the real thing. They soaked up gravy beautifully and filled stomachs fast, which was all most families cared about. The taste was mild and familiar, even comforting. Some people even added garlic powder or cream of mushroom soup to give it more depth. For kids, it was one of the few dishes that felt indulgent, a warm pile of softness on an otherwise simple plate. No one talked about what was missing. They were too busy enjoying what they had. Instant mashed potatoes reminded everyone that convenience was not laziness. It was survival with a smile. Marshmallow-topped sweet potatoes brought color and sweetness to the table, even when the pantry was nearly bare. Most families used canned yams, drained and mixed with margarine and brown sugar before layering marshmallows on top. When baked, it came out bubbling and golden, a dessert disguised as a side dish. As it cooked, the marshmallows slowly melted into a caramelized crust, filling the house with the smell of sugar and cinnamon. Parents would pull it from the oven like it was a prize, the gooey topping stretching with every spoonful. Kids could barely wait to dig in, even if it meant burning their tongues on that first molten bite. Kids loved it, adults tolerated it, and everyone recognized it as a holiday classic. It was cheap to make, cheerful to look at, and filling enough to stretch a small meal into something grand. Many mothers called it their special dish, the one that made dinner feel fancy. The smell of caramelized sugar and cinnamon made even the humblest kitchen feel festive. Sure, it was sticky and far too sweet, but that was part of its charm. Marshmallow-topped sweet potatoes became a symbol of optimism, a reminder that a touch of sweetness could make any hard year easier to swallow. Canned corn pudding was one of those dishes that made the most of simple ingredients. All you needed were a few cans of creamed corn, a handful of flour, and maybe an egg or two to bind it together. The result was a buttery, soft pudding that tasted like home. As it baked, the top turned golden and crisp, while the inside stayed rich and warm. The scent of corn and butter filled the air, making even the simplest dinner feel like a celebration. When it came out of the oven, it was set proudly in the center of the table, steam rising like a sign of success. It was cheap, hearty, and perfect for stretching a meal when guests showed up unannounced. In the 1970s, many households served it alongside turkey loaf or meatloaf, calling it their holiday comfort. It filled the plate and the stomach with sweetness that made even children eat their vegetables. Some families passed it off as Southern-style cooking, even if the recipe came from the back of a can. Its golden crust and soft interior gave it the look of something much fancier than it was. For those who grew up with it, the memory still brings warmth, a simple, glowing reminder of thrift wrapped in gratitude. Bisquick biscuits were one of the easiest ways to make a holiday meal feel like a feast. That yellow box was a miracle worker for families on tight budgets. With just water or milk, anyone could bake fluffy, buttery biscuits that tasted homemade. The dough came together in minutes, thick and sticky under calloused hands that had made it 100 times before. The smell of them baking filled even the smallest kitchens with warmth, masking the chill that came from drafty walls or tight finances. When the tray came out of the oven, those golden biscuits looked like celebration itself. Simple, hot, and perfect. Fresh bread was expensive, but Bisquick gave people a way to fill baskets with warm, golden rolls for pennies. The smell alone made any kitchen feel like Christmas. Many kids grew up remembering those biscuits more fondly than the meal itself, soft, flaky, and dripping with margarine or syrup. For mothers, it was a point of pride that something so cheap could feel so comforting. Some even used the mix to make dumplings or shortcakes when dessert ingredients ran low. It was the kind of invention that kept people fed and spirits high. The 1970s were about making do, and Bisquick turned that into an art form. Budget meatloaf with saltine crackers was the king of resourceful holiday cooking. Ground beef was a splurge, so stretching it with crushed crackers and ketchup made it last longer. Every bite tasted like hard work and home. Mothers shaped it with care, glazing it with whatever they could find: tomato paste, brown sugar, or even jelly. The smell filled the house, mixing with the sound of laughter and old Christmas music on the radio. It might not have been turkey or ham, but it was rich in something else: comfort. Kids fought for the crispy ends, and fathers proudly carved it like it was prime rib. The leftovers made sandwiches that lasted through the week. It was proof that a little creativity could make a humble meal feel grand. In the 1970s, that was the real secret of surviving the holidays, turning whatever you had into something worth remembering. Tuna casserole was the quiet hero of holiday dinners for families who had to make every dollar count. It was cheap, filling, and surprisingly comforting, a creamy combination of pantry staples that made even tough times feel a little softer. A can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, some egg noodles, and a sprinkle of breadcrumbs were all you needed to turn an empty table into a small feast. The smell of it baking, warm, savory, and slightly salty, was enough to make any kitchen feel like home. For many, it stood in for the ham or turkey they could not afford, and no one complained. The crunchy topping, made from whatever was on hand, saltines, cornflakes, or stale bread, added the perfect contrast to the creamy base. Kids picked out the peas, parents ignored the complaints, and everyone ate until the pan was scraped clean. Tuna casserole was not glamorous, but it was dependable. It showed up year after year, proof that resourcefulness could taste like comfort. And when leftovers were served the next day, reheated in a well-worn dish, it tasted even better, like pride disguised as dinner. Canned cranberry sauce was one of those little luxuries poor families could afford to bring color and sweetness to their table. You could buy it for less than $1, and it instantly made dinner feel like a real celebration. It slid out of the can with a soft slurp, still carrying the ridges from the tin, wobbling like a red jewel on a glass dish. Some people sliced it into perfect circles, others mashed it with a fork to make it look fresh. It was sweet, tangy, and oddly satisfying. It paired with everything, stuffing, turkey loaf, or even Spam, and made each bite feel festive. For kids, it was the closest thing to candy they would see on the table. It looked fancy even when nothing else did, gleaming under the kitchen light like a store-bought treasure. Every time someone spooned it onto their plate, they were reminded that celebration did not have to be expensive. That single can turn ordinary dinners into something you could call a holiday meal, and that was magic enough. Deviled eggs were a small triumph in homes that had little to spare. A single carton of eggs could stretch far when mixed with mustard, mayonnaise, and a dash of paprika. They were rich in flavor and filling, a rare treat that felt indulgent but cost next to nothing. Mothers often made them in the early morning before church, the kitchen filled with the scent of vinegar and salt water as the eggs boiled. The sound of shells cracking on countertops became a familiar rhythm of family gatherings. Even when times were rough, there was always a plate of these little golden halves to brighten the table. Boiling and peeling them took patience, but the effort paid off. They looked elegant, lined up on a chipped plate, bright yellow centers against soft white shells, like sunshine arranged for a celebration. Every family had their own spin. Some added relish, others used vinegar. A few sprinkled dried herbs to make them fancy. Kids loved to grab them off the plate before dinner started, leaving parents to pretend not to notice. They appeared at every church potluck, Christmas Eve gathering, and New Year's dinner because they fit every budget and every appetite. There was something about deviled eggs that made them feel generous, as if abundance could come from a single carton of eggs and a few spoons of hope. They were humble, yes, but they were also proud. Velveeta cheese dip was pure 1970s holiday magic in a bowl. It was smooth, salty, and full of personality. Everything a crowd pleaser needed to be. Made from a brick of processed cheese and a jar of salsa or canned tomatoes, it was simple enough for anyone to make. It was the first thing to disappear at family gatherings, as kids crowded around with crackers and potato chips in hand. Someone always burned their tongue trying to taste it too soon, unable to wait for it to cool. The bright yellow color practically glowed under fluorescent lights, a symbol of celebration even in small homes. You tossed it in a slow cooker, let it melt, and suddenly you had something that felt like a party. It was the dish that said, "We might not have much, but we still know how to celebrate." The warm, gooey cheese clung to every cracker and chip, turning even the cheapest snacks into something special. Friends gathered around it, dipping, laughing, and wiping orange smudges on napkins. It was the kind of appetizer that brought people together before dinner even began. Velveeta was cheap, dependable, and always on the shelf, which made it the perfect ingredient for a decade that valued convenience. It was a small indulgence in a time when every bite mattered, and for many families, that yellow bowl of cheese dip was the holiday spirit, melty, messy, and full of joy. Vienna sausages and barbecue sauce were the working man's cocktail food. Fancy parties had shrimp or meatballs. Poor families had these tiny canned sausages simmered in sweet, sticky sauce. The scent of them cooking filled kitchens with something rich and smoky, fooling guests into thinking it was something extravagant. The sauce bubbled on the stove, coating every piece until it glistened like candy. Mothers stirred the pot with care, tasting and tweaking the flavor with whatever they had: ketchup, brown sugar, or even a splash of cola. When the doorbell rang, they set the pot right on the table with toothpicks, proud of what they had made from $1's worth of food. Served in toothpicks or straight from the pot, they were a hit at every holiday gathering. The texture was soft, the flavor salty, and the sauce clung to your fingers no matter how careful you were. Kids loved them because they were bite-sized and sweet. Adults loved them because they cost next to nothing. You could stretch one can into a whole tray of appetizers that disappeared within minutes. For families who could not afford to splurge, this was their way of joining in the fun without breaking the bank. They were proof that celebration was about creativity, not money. A cheap can of Vienna sausages could taste like luxury when shared with people you loved. Hot dog pigs in a blanket were the kind of treat that made kids smile even when times were tough. Crescent dough from a tube and a few cheap hot dogs were all you needed to turn an ordinary day into a holiday. The dough puffed up golden in the oven, wrapping each slice of hot dog in a soft, buttery shell. The smell filled small kitchens, mingling with laughter and the clatter of plates as families gathered to wait. Parents pretended it was a fancy appetizer, arranging them on serving trays with toothpicks or dipping sauces. Children giggled as they bit into the warm rolls, mustard smudged on their cheeks. The taste of joy far outweighing the simplicity of the meal, they came out smelling like heaven, and everyone crowded around to grab one before they cooled. For many, this was their version of hors d'oeuvres, a playful, filling appetizer that felt like a party. Moms served them with ketchup or mustard, sometimes arranged in neat circles on paper plates to make them look fancy. They were cheap, cheerful, and universally loved. Even the adults who had grown up in harder times could not resist them. When money was scarce, pigs in a blanket became more than just food. They were little edible reminders that joy could be baked right out of a can and served hot. Jello molds were a masterpiece of 1970s thrift and creativity. They shimmered like stained glass, came in every color imaginable, and cost just a few coins to make. All you needed was a packet of gelatin, a can of fruit, and a mold, often shaped like a ring or star. Mothers planned their Jello molds days in advance, waiting for each layer to set before adding the next. Kids peered into the fridge, watching the colors build one by one like magic. By the time it was finished, it was more art than dessert. A wiggly sculpture made entirely from sugar and imagination. The result was a wobbly centerpiece that looked like something out of a magazine. Mothers took pride in their Jello molds, layering colors or adding cottage cheese to make them seem more gourmet. The texture might have been strange, the flavor overly sweet, but no one cared. It was cheap, cheerful, and festive. At family gatherings, everyone waited for the grand reveal, the moment it slid perfectly out of the mold with a satisfying wobble. It was dessert and decoration rolled into one, an edible monument to ingenuity. For poor families, it was proof that beauty and joy could come from even the simplest pantry ingredients. Jello molds sparkled in a world that often felt gray, and that made them priceless. Fruit cocktail salad was one of those desserts that made you feel rich even when you were scraping by. A few cans of mixed fruit, some whipped topping, and a sprinkle of coconut or marshmallows turned into something bright and sweet. The syrupy scent alone could fill a kitchen with anticipation. It was always served in the family's best glass bowl, even if that meant borrowing one from a neighbor. Mothers fluffed the whipped topping carefully, folding it into the fruit with the same care they'd give to something much fancier. The kids would fight over the cherries, the rarest treasures in a sea of peaches and pears. Served cold, it looked light and colorful, almost elegant. Every spoonful was a reminder that celebration did not have to mean extravagance. Kids loved to chase the cherries, and adults appreciated how far a few cans could stretch. It showed up at every family gathering, from Thanksgiving to Christmas Eve, served in glass bowls that made it shine. Sometimes it was topped with a dollop of Cool Whip or a drizzle of condensed milk for extra richness. It might not have been a bakery masterpiece, but it was made with pride, and that made it taste better than anything store-bought. Fruit cocktail salad was sweetness made from scarcity, and in the 1970s, that was a victory all its own. Instant pudding pie was the kind of dessert that saved tired parents and delighted hungry kids all at once. It was smooth, creamy, and almost luxurious, even though it came straight from a box. With instant pudding mix, milk, and a store-bought crust, anyone could whip up a homemade pie in minutes. The sound of the whisk scraping the bowl was almost musical, a familiar rhythm in kitchens across the country. Children begged to lick the spoon, their faces lighting up with joy at the taste of chocolate or butterscotch. The pie sat cooling on countertops, promising a sweet ending to another day of making do. The flavors, chocolate, vanilla, butterscotch, felt indulgent without being expensive. Topped with a swirl of Cool Whip, it was the kind of dessert that made even modest dinners feel complete. The best part was how easy it was to make. Even children could stir the mix and feel like bakers. Families passed the recipe around and neighbors shared slices wrapped in foil after church or community dinners. For those who grew up poor, instant pudding pie was a taste of comfort, a soft, sweet ending to another year of hard work. It was not about luxury, it was about love served in a crust. Cool Whip and instant coffee mousse was the kind of fancy dessert that poor families made to feel rich for a night. Cool Whip was cheap and lasted forever in the freezer, while instant coffee added just enough sophistication to make it seem like something out of a restaurant. You mixed, chilled, and served it in mismatched cups, pretending it was something elegant. Mothers often made it in secret, letting it set in the fridge until the children had gone to bed. Then, late at night, parents would sit together with small bowls of the mousse, sharing spoonfuls in quiet celebration. It was a rare moment of peace, a tiny reward for the long days of stretching every dollar and keeping the lights on. The result was surprisingly delicious, light, fluffy, and a little bit grown up. It was the perfect example of 1970s creativity, turning pantry staples into something that felt indulgent. Families served it at Christmas or New Year's, proud of the illusion it created. It might have been made from imitation cream and instant powder, but it felt like a treat reserved for the well-off. Every spoonful tasted like a small escape, a moment of luxury carved out of the ordinary. For people who had little, it was not just dessert, it was dignity in a dish. Canned fruitcake was the kind of holiday treat that proved luxury did not always come from a bakery. It came wrapped in shiny foil and packed into a tin, dense with candied fruit, sugar, and nostalgia. For poor families in the 1970s, it was the closest thing to tradition they could afford. The rich smell of spices and syrup filled the air the moment you cracked open the lid. Each slice was heavy, sticky, and impossibly sweet. One small piece could stretch across the whole family. The canned version was cheap, long-lasting, and practical, which made it a holiday staple. Some families dressed it up with a drizzle of icing sugar, while others sliced it thin to make it last through New Year's. The bright red and green cherries caught the light, adding a touch of color to otherwise modest tables. For many kids, this was the first fancy dessert they ever tasted, a taste of something that looked store-bought and grown up. Sure, it might have been overly sweet or oddly chewy, but no one cared. In those kitchens, the fruitcake meant celebration, even when the rest of the year had been hard. It sat proudly beside canned ham and instant potatoes, proof that the spirit of the holidays could fit neatly inside a tin. The canned fruitcake might have been mass-produced, but the memories it created were homemade. Canned pumpkin pie filling was one of the most beloved shortcuts of the 1970s. Families who could not afford fresh produce still wanted to keep holiday traditions alive, and this simple can made that possible. The mixture of pumpkin, sugar, and spices was ready to go. Just pour it into a crust and bake. It filled every kitchen with the warm, familiar smell of cinnamon and nutmeg, wrapping even the most frugal homes in the scent of comfort. For those who had grown up with their mothers baking from scratch, this was an easier, cheaper alternative that did not require peeling or pureeing anything. The pie came out golden, smooth, and rich, fooling anyone who did not already know its secret. Parents called it homemade, and for all intents and purposes it came from love, if not from fresh pumpkins. Served with a dollop of Cool Whip, it became the centerpiece of every poor family's dessert table. Sometimes, families saved the last slice to eat cold the next morning with coffee, savoring the sweetness just a little longer. Canned pumpkin pie filling turned the impossible into possible, holiday flavor without the price tag. It was the taste of gratitude baked into a crust. Frozen Salisbury steaks were the 1970s definition of convenience and comfort, especially for families living paycheck to paycheck. Those brown, gravy-covered patties sat in tidy rows in their aluminum trays, waiting to be heated in the oven. When they came out, steaming and savory, they looked like a feast compared to the everyday meals most families could afford. The flavor was simple, meaty, salty, and rich, but the feeling it created was much bigger. For some, this was their holiday dinner, eaten in front of a flickering television with a small decorated tree in the corner. It felt modern, practical, and just special enough to mark the season. The mashed potatoes and peas on the side might have come from the same tray, but they still carried that unmistakable sense of indulgence that only came once or twice a year. The smell of the gravy alone could make a cold apartment feel like a holiday home. Even though it was frozen food, it was filled with care, a reminder that you did not need silverware or a fancy table to celebrate. It was affordable dignity on a dinner plate. Frozen Salisbury steaks became part of countless American holiday stories, not because they were perfect, but because they were enough. Boxed macaroni and cheese was a lifeline for families trying to stretch their holiday meals without stretching their wallets. That orange powder and those small noodles became the comfort food of an entire generation. It was quick to make, filling, and beloved by children and adults alike. During the holidays, it sat proudly beside turkey loaf or Spam, turning even the humblest dinner into something cozy. The creamy, bright cheese sauce looked cheerful, and it was one of the few dishes that guaranteed clean plates at the end of the night. Some families added breadcrumbs, diced hot dogs, or even canned tuna to make it go further. Others served it plain, right out of the pot, steaming and simple. The taste was familiar, salty, creamy, and safe in a world that often felt uncertain. It might not have been baked or served in a fancy dish, but it was always eaten with joy. Boxed macaroni and cheese represented what it meant to make the best of what you had. A little creativity, a little compromise, and a whole lot of heart. The holidays were about gathering, and this dish filled stomachs while reminding everyone that comfort does not have to cost much. Eggnog made with powdered milk was the poor man's toast to the holidays, and it carried more love than any expensive bottle of brandy could. Milk was not always affordable, especially for large families, so powdered milk became the stand-in for celebration. You mixed it with water, added sugar, vanilla, and maybe a pinch of nutmeg, and suddenly you had something that felt luxurious. The flavor was thinner, sure, but it carried the same holiday warmth that people craved all year long. Some families added a drop of imitation rum extract to make it grown up, while kids sipped theirs by the glow of a tree strung with homemade ornaments. It was sweet, comforting, and shared from chipped mugs that somehow made it taste better. The act of making it felt special, a little bit of magic created from the most ordinary ingredients. For families struggling to get by, this was not just a drink, it was proof that they could still celebrate with joy. The laughter that followed, the clink of mismatched glasses, and the smell of nutmeg in the air made it priceless. Eggnog made with powdered milk was the spirit of the holidays in its purest form. Simple, sincere, and full of hope. Squeeze Parkay. Margarine looked like the future of cooking. Smooth, golden, and ready to squirt straight from a bottle. You didn't need a knife, a dish, or even manners. Just aim and squeeze. For busy 1980s households, it was heaven in a bottle. But the dream melted fast. The plastic packaging was made with chemicals that didn't play well with heat, and kitchens tend to get hot. Over time, the bottles began leaching toxins into the margarine, especially when left near stoves or windows. Families started noticing a strange film forming on their food, slick, waxy, and nothing like butter. Laboratory tests later confirmed what everyone feared. The bottles were slowly contaminating their contents. It was the kind of convenience no one wanted anymore. The FDA wasn't impressed. Consumers noticed strange aftertastes, discoloration, and even separation inside the bottle. Parkay scrambled to defend the product, insisting it was safe when used correctly, but the damage was done. By the late 1980s, new safety rules forced the company to retire the original design. It was a reminder that even convenience has limits, especially when your easy squeeze turns into a chemical squeeze. Heinz colored ketchup experiments were decades ahead of their time, and not in a good way. Before the neon green and purple nightmares of the 1990s, Heinz tried out orange, mustard yellow, and pea soup green ketchup in the 1970s, and traumatized shoppers instantly. Families opened bottles expecting fun, but ended up staring into something that looked like craft paint. Even restaurant owners refused to serve it, saying customers thought it looked spoiled. Kids dared each other to eat it, but the sight alone ruined the appetite. Heinz's research department reportedly called it a visual breakthrough, which just made it sound worse. The taste was the same, but the color destroyed the illusion of food. Red ketchup says comfort. Green ketchup says science experiment. Heinz insisted it was a playful twist for kids, but even children rejected it on sight. Supermarkets reported bottles leaking as the dye separated into streaks of horror. It lasted just long enough to become an urban legend, the kind of product that made you thankful for the normal red stuff. It was innovation at its weirdest. Ketchup for people who liked fear with their fries. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was the secret backbone of 1950s cooking. Found in every pantry, it wasn't just soup. It was the glue holding casseroles together across suburban America. A single can could stretch leftovers, feed a family, and make almost anything taste homemade. Housewives mixed it with tuna, green beans, chicken, or rice, creating dishes that were easy, creamy, and dependable. It was food engineering disguised as comfort food. For many families, that can represented more than a shortcut. It was a sign that even the busiest mother could still serve a meal made with love. It was innovation meeting affection, where a can opener replaced a rolling pin and nobody minded the trade. Every church potluck and holiday table owed something to that red and white can. It wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. A flavor that said home in every bite. The genius was in its versatility. It made ordinary ingredients feel indulgent. For women balancing new appliances and old expectations, Campbell's was a quiet helper in the background, saving time and sanity. Its rich, salty aroma defined what dinner smelled like in post-war kitchens. By the time you saw that familiar label, you already knew it was going to be good. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup turned cooking from a chore into a shortcut, and America gladly took the deal. Planters. Cheez Balls were neon orange perfection in a can. They came in bright blue tins that seemed to shine even in dim kitchen lights, each one stuffed with crunchy, cheesy spheres that left your fingers glowing. Opening the lid was a ceremony. The soft pop, the wave of fake cheese aroma, the first handful disappearing before you even noticed. They weren't real food, but they were real joy. You could polish off a can in one sitting and still want more. Cheez Balls weren't just a snack. They were personality. They turned every movie night, sleepover, and after-school hangout into a greasy-fingered feast. And when they vanished in the early 2000s, fans begged Planters to bring them back, proof that nostalgia tastes like powdered cheddar. When they finally returned decades later, the first pop of that lid was more than flavor. It was a time machine. Caffeinated chocolate bars were the ultimate 1980s hustle food. These candy bars weren't for kids. They were for stressed-out adults chasing deadlines and dreams. The sweet that keeps you going, the ads boasted, blending the comfort of chocolate with the rush of caffeine. It sounded genius until people realized they were basically eating 2 cups of coffee wrapped in sugar. The first bite tasted like victory. The second tasted like regret. People would crash hard within hours, jittery and exhausted. Some companies even marketed them to students, sparking outrage among parents and health officials alike. Each bar packed so much caffeine that your heart raced before you finished unwrapping it. Office workers swore by them. Doctors swore at them. The FDA quickly stepped in after reports of jittery customers and sleepless nights began piling up. For a while, they were everywhere, near cash registers, in vending machines, even next to energy pills at gas stations. The bars promised focus, energy, and alertness, but what they really delivered was anxiety and regret. By the end of the decade, stricter caffeine limits made them illegal to sell in grocery aisles. Today, they're remembered as the candy that tried to do too much. Dessert, coffee, and chaos, all in one bite. Space food sticks were supposed to make you feel like an astronaut, but most people felt more like hostages to bad taste. Marketed as the food of the future, these chewy, tube-shaped snacks promised energy, convenience, and space-age nutrition. In reality, they were rubbery chocolate glue wrapped in foil, sticking to your teeth and your soul in equal measure. The packaging screamed adventure, but the flavor whispered punishment. They were dense enough to survive re-entry, yet fragile enough to crumble into brown dust if left in the sun. Parents kept buying them because kids loved the NASA tie-in, not because anyone actually wanted to eat them. It was the only snack that could make both astronauts and children question their life choices. They came in flavors like caramel, peanut butter, and chocolate, though none resembled anything found on Earth. Kids begged their parents for them, imagining themselves floating in zero gravity, only to realize astronauts probably ate better than this. The ads showed smiling families pretending this was adventure food, but in every kitchen, the reaction was the same: confusion, then regret. The texture was somewhere between an eraser and a protein bar that lost its will to live. They disappeared by the 1980s, only to return decades later as a nostalgia novelty. because apparently even bad memories can make money if you wrap them in silver. Swanson TV dinners changed the way America ate, literally overnight. Before them, families sat down together at the dining table, but by the mid-1950s, dinner was moving to the living room, served on a metal tray in front of the television. Each frozen meal, turkey, mashed potatoes, peas, and a brownie, felt futuristic, like something out of a science fair. Housewives loved them because they saved time, and children loved them because they felt special, like having a meal made just for them. Swanson's idea came from a surplus of Thanksgiving turkey, and what could have been a disaster turned into a cultural phenomenon. It was the perfect marriage of convenience and novelty, wrapped in shiny aluminum. The television tray soon became as essential as the set itself, transforming mealtime into family entertainment. It was food built for the atomic age, neat, portioned, and just modern enough to feel exciting. For the first time, America could eat and watch together, no mess, no fuss. It was comfort and convenience served hot in 25 minutes flat. The Swanson TV dinner wasn't just food, it was the birth of the modern mealtime, a sign that progress could be eaten with a fork. Yes, this was real. In the 1950s, novelty stores sold dog smoking kits, designed to teach pets to hold cigarettes in their mouths while exhaling smoke. Advertisements promised endless laughter and party entertainment, complete with instructions and a small clamp to fit over a dog's snout. Crowds gathered at picnics or block parties to watch Fido puff away like a tired office worker. The dogs, of course, had no idea what was happening. The kits didn't hurt them directly, but secondhand smoke and sheer indignity probably didn't help. Even by mid-century standards, it was surreal, a nation so charmed by smoke that it tried to share it with its pets. These were the years when fun often meant forgetting the line between novelty and nonsense. It was the decade's most surreal expression of human boredom, proof that if people could make something smoke, they would. The craze faded as quickly as it began, but the photos still haunt history books. Smiling families, tail-wagging pets, and a cloud of absurdity no one seemed to notice. In the 1950s, even man's best friend couldn't escape humanity's worst ideas. 3D Doritos were like snack technology from the future. The concept was simple. Take the classic Dorito, puff it up with air, and turn it into a crunchy, hollow triangle of flavor. But the experience? That was something else. Opening a bag felt like unsealing a futuristic invention, chips that looked too perfect to be real. They were light yet loud, the kind of crunch that echoed through a cafeteria. Kids treated them like collectibles, saving the rare unbroken ones like trophies. They crackled differently, louder, crispier, more dramatic. The flavors like nacho cheese and Cool Ranch were the same, but the shape made them feel elevated, like eating chips from another dimension. The commercials played into that sci-fi vibe, complete with futuristic fonts and slow-motion crunches. For a brief, shining moment, 3D Doritos felt like the next big thing. Kids smuggled them into classrooms and sleepovers like prized possessions. They became the snack of the future that arrived too soon, vanishing before the world was ready to appreciate them. Decades later, their return sparked that same curiosity, the question of whether snacks could ever feel that cool again. And then, just as suddenly, they were gone, leaving behind the memory of that satisfying crunch that no flat chip could replicate. When they returned decades later, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. 3D Doritos, original formula, were snack evolution taken too far. Crunchy, puffed Doritos shaped like tiny shells of doom. Marketed as next-level snacking, they were fried in oil-heavy formulas that made them dangerously addictive, and later, questionable in the eyes of regulators. Each bite exploded with flavor dust and grease, leaving fingerprints that could identify you for days. Kids loved the sound they made, that loud, hollow crunch that echoed like fireworks. Parents hated the oil stains left on furniture, walls, and jeans. Health officials hated them even more when lab tests showed oil saturation levels bordering on hazardous. People loved the crunch, but their stomachs didn't always agree. Complaints about the oils used pushed the snack into the FDA's spotlight. For a while, 3D Doritos became the stuff of playground legend, the chip that bit back. By the early 2000s, they vanished, quietly replaced by safer and less greasy iterations. They returned years later, reformulated and rebranded, but the original remains a myth among snack enthusiasts, proof that sometimes the future of food is a little too oily to handle. Tuna Noodle Loaf Mix was the Frankenstein's monster of mid-century meal kits. Inside the box was powdered sauce, dried noodles, and a mysterious gelatin binder that turned dinner into a wiggling block of horror. Add canned tuna and water, and voila, a loaf that looked alive and smelled dead. It wobbled on the plate like it was trying to escape, oozing grayish liquid from its sides. Kids stared at it in fear. Parents pretended it was innovative, and even cats circled it suspiciously. Some households gave up halfway and called it soup instead. It still wasn't edible. The gelatin made it both dry and wet at the same time, a texture only nightmares could describe. It jiggled when it shouldn't have, squeaked when sliced, and somehow managed to taste both fishy and flavorless. Families across America tried to eat it politely, but even the dog walked away. The company behind it called it a wholesome family dinner. History called it culinary trauma. The 1970s produced many bad ideas, but this one defied physics, taste, and mercy. Tuna Noodle Loaf Mix was proof that some foods should remain mysteries. Blue Bonnet margarine marked the beginning of a quiet revolution at the breakfast table. Butter had always been the gold standard, but post-war practicality changed everything. Housewives were managing budgets, waistlines, and new appliances, and margarine fit right in. Sold in tidy, foil-wrapped sticks, it was cheaper, lasted longer, and spread more easily on warm toast. Its bright blue packaging promised modern living with a cheerful confidence. Everything's better with Blue Bonnet on it. For many women, it was not just a product. It was a symbol of control, convenience, and choice in a rapidly changing world. Unlike butter, margarine could sit on the counter without guilt or waste. It became the silent hero of countless sandwiches and pie crusts, blending seamlessly into recipes while freeing homemakers from old-fashioned limitations. The taste might have been a little different, but the freedom it represented was worth more than flavor. It embodied the optimism of the decade, when technology and thrift could work hand in hand. Blue Bonnet margarine made it possible to live well without spending more, and in a time when women were redefining what homemade meant, that felt like progress. Crystal Pepsi was a bold experiment that tasted like the future but confused almost everyone. A completely clear cola, it was marketed as pure, clean, and revolutionary. People expected a citrus drink, but nope, it was just Pepsi, without the caramel color. The first sip was disorienting. Your brain said lemon lime, but your taste buds screamed cola. It was strange, fascinating, and oddly addictive. The commercials were epic too, complete with Van Halen soundtracks and shining city skylines. Crystal Pepsi became a cultural flashpoint, a soda that defied expectations and still managed to make history. It didn't last long, less than 2 years, but it left an unforgettable impression. Decades later, it returned for nostalgic fans who remembered the thrill of drinking something that looked wrong but felt so right. It was weird, it was wonderful, and it was unmistakably 90s. Aspartame heavy diet drinks ruled the 1980s like artificial royalty. Every company wanted in on the low-calorie craze, and aspartame was the magic word, sweeter than sugar, with zero guilt. But behind the fizzy slogans and pastel cans was a growing storm of controversy. The commercials made it look glamorous, thin models sipping soda on beaches and boardwalks, living proof that chemistry could be chic. But reports of strange side effects, headaches, nausea, dizziness, began to spread. Health watchdogs accused companies of putting profit before safety, and suddenly 0 calories didn't sound so refreshing. Reports of headaches, dizziness, and long-term health concerns turned the miracle sweetener into a national debate. Diet sodas that once promised vitality suddenly felt toxic, their ingredients lists sounding more like chemistry homework than refreshment. Regulators scrambled, companies reformulated, and loyal fans were left wondering if their favorite drinks were safe or secretly sinister. By the end of the decade, aspartame was under tighter scrutiny, forcing soda makers to reinvent themselves again. For those who remember the first wave of diet drinks, it was an era defined by blind faith in science and the rude awakening that followed. Pizza in a Can by Chef Boyardee was the culinary equivalent of optimism gone wrong. A revolutionary family pizza kit, it promised homemade flavor with the convenience of a can, which should have been the first warning sign. Inside was dough mix, sauce, and cheese powder that smelled like damp cardboard left in the sun. The dough was sticky, the sauce metallic, and the cheese refused to melt no matter how long you baked it. When you finally pulled it from the oven, it looked like regret covered in red paint. Families gathered in excitement for pizza night, only to discover the crust was chewy in the middle and hard enough on the edges to double as roofing material. Even hungry teenagers couldn't pretend to like it. Chef Boyardee advertised it as fun for the whole family, and in a way, they weren't wrong, because everyone laughed at how terrible it was. It was edible only in theory, and memorable only because of how impossible it was to forget. Pizza in a can became a symbol of 1970s food ambition, a time when anything seemed possible, even if it tasted like despair. Bisquick baking mix was the kitchen shortcut every homemaker dreamed of. It came in a cheerful yellow box that promised fresh biscuits, pancakes, waffles, and dumplings, all in minutes. What once took time, skill, and a little luck could now be done with a single scoop and a splash of milk. In an age obsessed with efficiency and modern living, Bisquick was nothing short of a culinary revolution. It made breakfast spontaneous again, the kind of meal you could whip up before the coffee finished brewing. Every mom swore by it, and every kid learned to recognize the smell of Bisquick pancakes as a sign that morning had truly begun. The appeal was simple. It worked every time. No mess, no guessing, no failed dough. It turned the everyday cook into a reliable baker, something generations before could only dream of. Ads boasted that you could make anything from Bisquick, and they were not far off. From strawberry shortcake to pot pies, the mix became a silent partner in millions of kitchens. It was fast, flexible, and perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the modern family. Bisquick wasn't just flour and leavening. It was a box full of confidence for the 1950s homemaker, proof that convenience and care could live side by side on the dinner table. Oreo O cereal was breakfast gone deliciously wrong, and that's exactly why everyone loved it. Imagine waking up and pouring a bowl of mini chocolate Oreo rings swimming in milk that instantly turned to dessert. It was sugary, crunchy, and pure 1990s excess. Parents rolled their eyes, but kids thought it was genius. You weren't just eating cereal. You were eating cookies and somehow calling it breakfast. Every spoonful was a rebellion disguised as a balanced meal. The commercials leaned hard into the fun, featuring kids breakdancing through clouds of cookie crumbs. It became an icon of cartoon mornings and sleep-deprived Saturday marathons. When Oreo O's disappeared from shelves, it took a piece of childhood with it. The cereal aisle hasn't been the same since, no matter how many limited editions they release. Oreo O's didn't just feed kids, it fueled memories of the sweetest kind. Rely tampons by Procter & Gamble were a triumph of marketing and a tragedy of science. Sold in grocery aisles and advertised as revolutionary, they promised unmatched absorbency through their unique super sponge design. For a while, they were hailed as a breakthrough in women's health. But in 1980, the dream turned deadly. The synthetic fibers used in Rely tampons were linked to toxic shock syndrome, a bacterial infection that proved fatal for dozens of women. The product's sponge-like material, designed to trap more moisture, also created the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Doctors quickly raised alarms, but Procter & Gamble's marketing machine was faster than the science. It took a national outcry and mounting deaths for the truth to finally hit the shelves. The recall was swift, the outrage faster, and the damage permanent. Rely disappeared from stores almost overnight, but the incident changed the entire industry. New safety standards, labeling laws, and medical research came directly from the disaster. It was a haunting reminder that even innovation can go horribly wrong when profit outpaces precaution. For a generation of shoppers, Rely wasn't just a brand. It was a warning stamped in fine print. Post-corn Toasties cereal was the great imposter of breakfast aisles. A knockoff so blatant it could only have been made in the 1970s. Trying to ride the coattails of Kellogg's Corn Flakes, Post created something that looked the same but tasted like regret and cardboard dust. The box screamed sunshine and happiness, but the cereal inside was as joyless as dry paper. Each flake disintegrated the moment milk touched it, turning into a soggy film that clung to the spoon like glue. The smell was faintly burnt, as if even the factory gave up halfway through. Parents bought it thinking they'd save a few cents. Kids refused it like medicine. Even sugar couldn't fix it. No matter how much you poured, it still tasted like broken promises. Post claimed their cereal was wholesome, crispy, and golden. Two of those words were lies, and the third was a stretch. Corn Toasties became a brief symbol of everything wrong with imitation food, a product that tried to be familiar but only reminded you how good the real thing was. It disappeared quietly, leaving behind empty bowls and the taste of defeat. Cracker Jack was more than a snack. It was a little piece of American magic tucked inside every box. Sweet caramel-coated popcorn and peanuts tumbled together in that familiar red and white striped package, and at the bottom waited a prize that made every handful an adventure. Kids tore into the bags, not just for the taste, but for the tiny surprise buried within, a sticker, a ring, a trinket worth its weight in excitement. In a world without digital screens or fast distractions, that little prize felt like treasure. The sound of the box shaking was the sound of pure anticipation, a simple thrill that never grew old. Even adults could not resist the nostalgia of it, remembering afternoons at ball games or movie matinees where Cracker Jack was the treat of choice. The caramel stuck to your fingers and the sweetness lingered long after the last peanut was gone. Its sailor mascot smiled from every box, a symbol of simpler times and innocent pleasures. It was not fancy, but it was full of heart, a snack that reminded everyone that joy could come from the smallest things. In the 1950s grocery aisle, Cracker Jack stood proudly as a reminder that life's sweetest moments often came wrapped in something humble, crunchy, and just a little sticky. Ecto-Cooler High C was the ultimate 90s drink, radioactive green, sweet as liquid candy, and completely tied to Ghostbusters fever. Originally created as a tie-in for the cartoon The Real Ghostbusters, it quickly took on a life of its own. Kids didn't even need to know who Slimer was, they just knew that bright green meant fun. The citrusy tang wasn't natural, but it was delicious in a way only 90s sugar could be. The box design alone, complete with that grinning green ghost, made it feel like you were drinking from a comic book. Lunchboxes across the country glowed with Ecto-Cooler cartons, and playground trades were serious business. You've got Ecto-Cooler? I'll give you 2 Capri Suns. It became a cultural artifact, bottled nostalgia for an age when color and chaos ruled snack time. When it was discontinued, fans mourned. When it was briefly re-released, adults lined up to buy it again, not for the taste, but for the memories it poured out. MSG-laden soup mixes were the backbone of 1980s casseroles, stews, and potluck dinners. Every home cook had a few packets stashed away, ready to transform boring chicken into culinary magic. Just add water, the boxes said, and families did, by the millions. The flavor was bold, addictive, and unmistakably artificial. Then came the MSG scare, a flood of reports blaming monosodium glutamate for headaches, fatigue, and Chinese restaurant syndrome. Overnight, something that once meant flavor now meant fear. MSG became public enemy number 1 thanks to sensational headlines and questionable studies. Suddenly, housewives who'd spent years cooking with it were tossing it in the trash. Even companies that knew the science was shaky jumped ship to avoid backlash, Manufacturers scrambled to hide it under new names like hydrolyzed protein. Supermarkets purged shelves and recipe books quietly rewrote themselves. The craze for all-natural cooking that followed changed the way America seasoned its food forever. By the 1990s, MSG's reputation was unfairly destroyed, though science later found little evidence of harm. Still, those old packets disappeared for good, taking with them a flavor so intense it almost made you forget what real food tasted like. If these humble 1970s holiday foods brought back warm memories of simpler times, share the one your family couldn't live without in the comments. Give that like button a hearty spoonful of love, and subscribe so we can keep serving up nostalgia together.